Chairman. Ms. Felbaugh-Brown, could you comment on the activities in Nangarhar and how you think those have turned out in terms of our broader strategy and what the basis is for your assessment as well?
Absolutely. I think Nangarhar is an absolutely critical province to watch, both because it's one of the important drug-producing areas, has been for decades during the era of the Taliban, and has always competed with the South as a production area. It's also a critical province because while Pashtun, it is not pro-Taliban naturally. Many of the tribes have historically had deeply antagonistic relationship with the Taliban and continue doing so today, except when counter-narcotics operations conducted in the absence of livelihood push them into the hands of the Taliban, which is what we have witnessed. The first wave of eradication in Nangarhar was in 2005 under a different governor. With the same approach, essentially as a result of promises of alternative livelihoods, as well as enforcement through forced eradication and imprisonment, he managed to negotiate with tribal chiefs to bring cultivation down to close to zero. But alternative livelihoods never materialized beyond Jalalabad, one of the major cities, the provincial capital, and one of the major cities in Afghanistan. Jalalabad itself then has been effectively weaned off from poppy cultivation because the area is resource rich. It has good access to markets, it's a vibrant place on a route to Pakistan, and there are very many other economic opportunities, including in Jalalabad itself. Off-farm income is very important. The rest, however, was not the case for the vast majority of the province. 20 kilometers outside of Jalalabad, poverty was immense. Within a year, Nangarhar was back to the level of cultivation that it was prior to eradication. Since then, for 2 years, we have had a new governor, Gul Aga Shirzai, a former governor of Kandahar and a person of rather notorious qualification in Afghanistan, coming from a different province. He was, again, highly motivated to suppress cultivation, hoping he would be a presidential candidate. In fact, he did until he pulled out, and trying to curry favor with the international community. Once again, as a result of promises of alternative livelihoods, as well as enforcement, threats that NATO would bomb houses of those who cultivate opium poppy, he suppressed poppy close to zero. Once again, the pattern was exactly the same. Alternative livelihoods did not materialize. Poverty was immense. Income fell by 90%. Much of the province tried going abroad to Pakistan, to the madrasas that feed the Deobandi movement. Districts such as Shinwar, Cochin, Ajiani, along the border with Pakistan became deeply destabilized. Intelligence provision to NATO forces has dried up. To an unprecedented degree, Nangarhar has become deeply destabilized in a way we have not seen since 2001. Although these tribes are not naturally pro-Taliban, we see immense level of Taliban mobilization and support. The 3 districts I mentioned have become no-go zones for government. This is increasingly true of other provinces. And since the whole province became so deeply destabilized and insecurity rose, even Jalalabad, the provincial market itself, has suffered economic decline, which in turn has led to a rise in criminality and once again support for the Taliban.
So you'd say that it backfired?
Absolutely, in an immense way. And because alternative livelihoods have been so focused on Jalalabad itself, because insecurity doesn't permit whether government officials or NGO workers to go outside, it's unsustainable because there is simply nothing left in vast chunks of the province.
And you use the phrase in your testimony, premature eradication. So your concern isn't that the eradication itself took place, but that it took place in the absence of adequate economic support or replacement.
Absolutely. The eradication efforts that originally took place around Jalalabad, I think well placed. There were legal resources, and the farmers that were subjected to eradication switched to diversified crop portfolios that frequently bring greater income than poppy itself, and were doing rather well, and to some extent continue doing well. The problem is, once you hit the areas 20, 30 kilometers outside of Jalalabad, where there is no access to markets, where there are no markets, no infrastructure, no microcredit, no access to land, short of renting for being a sharecropper, short of renting against opium poppy. These areas suffer tremendously, and eradication is counterproductive by strengthening the bond between the Taliban and the population, and ineffective because there is nothing that can come in to replace the economy.
Let me jump to Ms. McDonald on the subject of the microcredit element of this. It strikes me that the poppy crop is unique in that the Taliban, in particular the dealers, were in a position to actually advance funds to farmers. So when you eradicate, the next year's advancement doesn't come, and they get hit very hard right away. And there's no established microcredit that I'm aware of. How, in your proposal for the Poppies to Medicine program, would the local organization that is engaged in the manufacture and assures the quality of the morphine tablet, how would they finance that same early credit to the growers so that they can step in the place of the narco-traffickers?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Senator. One way to put it is the Taliban are much better at microcredit than the international community is. But it does prove it can be done.
We invented credit, and they're better. We invented public relations, and they're better. It's quite astonishing how we've been defeated at our own game by these people.
Yes, it is, unfortunately. You're absolutely right that, as I said, one of the things that we think is interesting about Poppy for Medicine, it's not just a counter-narcotic strategy, but it's a counterinsurgency strategy to bring us closer to the farming communities as their business partners.
I just need to know a little bit. I'm about actually very shortly to be there, and I wanted to have just a slightly clear understanding of how I'm north of you, unfortunately, but I've been there. And on that subject, just a very quick question. Your field office in Lashkar, how is it staffed, and how has the security situation been for it in the past years and to now during its tenure? What are you looking at?
My house is a regular civilian house inside Lashkar City, so if you drove past it, it doesn't have the markings of an international compound. I've been there primarily with my Afghan colleagues. We have an Afghan research team, so at the moment, I'm the only non-Afghan member of ICOS Afghanistan. So we travel as Afghans, civilians on the roads in regular local cars. And over the years, we become very familiar with the communities, the villages, the refugee camps. So I hope it would be correct to say we have some goodwill in the community. And so far, we've managed in this fashion. And Senator, you're absolutely invited over for tea if you're in the neighborhood.
If I get south, I will. But let's go back, if I could, before, I guess my time is out, but if you could just go back to how these pilot programs would step in place of the drug lords with the early advance financing to the farmers. How does that mechanism work?
Yeah, so you have to combine the microcredit mechanisms with a village licensing model, which means that if one of the farmers in the group allows his opium to be sold to the traffickers, then the entire village is going to lose their license, which we hope will mean that if the farmer is being pressurized by the Taliban, that he'll turn to the rest of the village and say, we've got a problem here. Yeah. So it's like it develops a bit of a community defense mechanism as well.
Does that, I'm not anywhere near as familiar as you are with the sort of tribal codes of Afghanistan, but I know that these are people who believe very deeply in the codes of honor and conduct and hospitality and various other things, Pashtunwala. And does that sort of communalization of the responsibility for producing the product fit into that existing code in a way that gives it more backing than
this is our thesis, and the reason